Hi guys, welcome to today's Academy session, guys, where we'll be looking at Hornbill reports, focusing on using the Hornbill Schema Designer. My name is Ricky Fearon, and I'm your instructor today. I'll be joined by Albina and Joel, who'll be there to assist you if you require any help. So while we're waiting for everybody to join today, for those of you that attended last session, using the chat, tell us something you knew you've learned from the previous session. And if you haven't worked on the previous session, maybe tell us about a book or a new movie that you've enjoyed recently. Yeah, use the chat and we'll see what interesting things we can produce. As I said, we'll just wait for everybody to come before we actually start. But yeah, if you answer any one of those two or both of those questions on the slide, that'd be most appreciated. Okay, so one of the things I just want to touch on today is the fact that you will be doing a lot of lab activity today, and some of it will be challenging. And the idea of these is to make sure that you fully understand the system and you can utilize reporting, and you're not just following our steps, you're using your brain to work out how to do. So you will find some of the labs will give you a scenario and then basically enable you to try and produce a report, for instance, from knowing the tables and the columns and how to put and some hints and tips to help you get through it. Don't panic. If you're really stuck, we do have the step-by-step instructions to get you through it, or additional information resources to get through it. And if it really has an issue, then we can give you the actual completed report that you can have a look at. But please have a go at all the labs. It's really important that you do that. So what are we doing today? We have a lot to cover today, and we'll learn best practices for designing effective reports. We'll explore the basics of database schemas and their importance. We'll also learn how to use the SQL Schema Designer in Hornbill. Building on that, we'll learn methods for applying filters and joins in your reports using the SQL Schema Designer. By the end of the session, even if you're unfamiliar with SQL, you will have the skills to create reports using the SQL Schema Designer. We'll show you how it simplifies the process, making it accessible and understandable regardless of your SQL proficiency level. Some of you will find the activities today a challenge, but we suggest that you attempt all of the activities, as I mentioned earlier, and remember that we're there to guide and help you through them. This is some time out of your day. You can explore and experiment without worrying about breaking things, as you'll be in a training instance on which we manage, and we'll be able to resolve any issues. If you do not complete an activity in the given time, don't worry, don't panic. You can complete it during the next activity. We will also allow some time at the end of the session for those of you that want to complete all the activities. Ultimately, have some fun and learn as much as you can today. And if you're not sure of anything, use the chat or raise your hand to get some assistance. So, before we start, let's recap what we covered in Hornbill Reporting Part 1. This will ensure that we're all on the same page and ready to tackle more sophisticated reporting techniques. So in Part 1, we explored Hornbill's suite of reporting tools and the roles each of them play. These include in-app reports, admin reports, views, advanced analytics. Each type has its unique benefits and use cases. Today, we'll build on this foundation and delve deeper into the specifics. So let's start with views. These are for quick insights directly from the request list. They allow you to create graphs and share them with users or teams. And here's a question for everyone. What's the most common insight or metric you've put in views or you've created using views within Hornbill or Service Manager? Put your answers in the chat. Okay, yeah. Some good ones coming through. Tickets per agent. Tickets assigned to the team, quite an important one. and active requests by team and analysts. So quickly being able to see what's active, and where they are, and resolve tickets by team. And a very good one. Thank you, Mush, Stefania, and Helen, and David. Oh, I like that one. Call source and tickets per team. Again, another useful one. Okay, good. Thank you very much. So the next one we looked at was the in-app reports, which are customizable and can be scheduled with these within the Service Manager app. They provide some flexibility and follow industry standards. And these are the reports that we create and put them into the system. You don't have to do anything apart from maybe select the criteria and roughly the filter that it has. So has anyone used the features from the in-app reports since our last session? Not sure where that would be, Janet, as that may be to do with criteria, but also the data that you get will be based on your rights and roles. So you may find that you can't see some of that information because you don't have access to some of the requests. It may be that's filtering them out. Okay, brilliant. Okay, guys, thanks again. So mixed devs, some of you haven't had a chance to look at them yet. Please do, and when you get a chance, because you will find them useful, and it may save you a lot of effort of trying to generate those reports in the reporting tool, but they're already there in-app reporting. Okay. Thank you, Andre. So we looked at admin reports in the last session. So these take things a step further by offering detailed analysis using entities and also the SQL schema, which we'll see today. These reports provide deeper insights and are highly customizable. What challenges have you encountered while creating admin reports, either that being via entities or if you've tried the SQL schema before? So share your experiences in the chat so we can learn from each other. So, basic SQL, finding correct tables. Yeah, that's a common one, Damien. And hopefully today you will overcome that basic SQL knowledge and realize you don't need to know SQL today. So hopefully we'll get that through to you today, which will help. Okay, Janet. So you should be able to get through today. So hopefully, if you do get any issues, let us know, and we'll try and get that sorted on the first activity. Okay, reports to Department of Category. Is that, Steve, because you had problems with doing that, or is that the report that you managed to create? Because that again is a common one, reports by department. Not always. Some of these reports, they sound easy, but they're not always so straightforward. Yeah, so you get tables and columns. Yeah, so hopefully we'll alleviate some of that today as well, Peter. Brilliant. You created. That's what you created. Thanks, Steve. Brilliant. Okay, again, thanks very much, guys. Let's move on. Okay, yeah, brilliant. Okay, so last time our focus was on creating reports using entities. We learned that entities are a very important concept. So let's spend some time to refresh you on their functionality. So when creating a report, we follow a simple process: retrieve the data and then perform some form of analytics. This approach ensures we get the most accurate and useful data. To simplify the data retrieval in Hornbill, we use entities. It's helpful because through entities, the relationships and constraints between different types of data are already defined. This helps you to quickly build reports without needing to write complex SQL queries. SQL is a structured query language used mainly to manage data directly in a database. But what are entities exactly? They represent objects or key data points like requests and users. while attributes are the properties or traits of these entities, such as the request ID or type. Relationships define how these entities are connected, which is essential for creating comprehensive reports. This understanding is fundamental as we move onto more advanced reporting techniques, especially using the SQL Schema Designer. Which we'll be looking at today. So, we said that to create a report, you would simply select a report user entity, which determines the tables and data fields available for reporting based on predefined relationships between entities. Actually, when creating the report in Hornbill, both SQL and entities serve to structure and organize data for extraction and analysis. But they do so in slightly different ways. Entities are essentially abstract representations of specific objects or concepts in our database, such as users, requests, incidents. They provide a higher level abstraction, focusing on what the data is rather than its technical details. This makes it much easier for non-technical users to understand and utilize. Plus, entities come with predefined relationships and attributes, making the data access much easier without needing to delve into complex SQL joins. Moving on to SQL or SQL, it offers us direct access to the database. This means we can precisely specify the data which we want to retrieve, manipulate, or analyze. It grants us fine-grained control over the data retrieval process, allowing us to fetch exactly the information we need for our reports. With SQL, we can create queries for advanced filtering, aggregations, and joins, allowing for highly customized reports. However, it is important to note that users need to understand some SQL basics and to make effective joins and write queries, which can be a bit daunting for non-technical users. So which method should you choose? Well, of course, it depends on what your needs are and what you're trying to produce. There's no significant difference in the output when using entities or SQL to create a report. Both can produce detailed and comprehensive reports. The primary difference lies in how the data is accessed and manipulated. The choice between entities and SQL often depends on the complexity of the report and the user's technical proficiency. There are two important differences. The first one is ease of use versus flexibility. This is a major factor when choosing which method to use to source data for a report. Entities offer ease of use and are great for standard reports, quick insights. So if you're new to reporting or prefer simplicity, start with entities. Meanwhile, SQL offers greater flexibility, power for complex and customized reports. So for those who are more comfortable with data manipulation and want greater customization, you can consider this one. Another important difference is integration. How does it integrate with Hornbill? In Hornbill, using entities in reports can be more straightforward as it integrates with the system's reporting tools. Entities are perfect for those who prefer simplified, predefined data structures and don't require extensive SQL knowledge. While SQL might require more manual setup and offers deeper customization. To close this, the choice between entities and SQL depends on your comfort with technical details and the complexity of the reports you need to generate. Both methods are valid and can be used effectively to create meaningful reports in Hornbill. Still, you don't need to be SQL proficient to create reports in Hornbill. Using SQL to create reports in Hornbill is simplified through the use of the schema or the SQL Schema Designer. Using the SQL Schema Designer in Hornbill, you can create create reports using a visual interface where you can define and manage report configurations without needing to write complex SQL queries. The tool allows you to establish relationships simply selecting tables, making the process more accessible to those without advanced SQL knowledge. As a result, you can focus on your data needs and efficiently generate comprehensive reports. Let's take a look at how entities and the SQL schema is visualized in the platform. Here's a picture from the Entity Viewer, which is available within Hornbill Service Manager. The Entity Viewer provides a visual representation of the various entities within our system. These entities may include elements such as requests, catalog items, SLAs, etc., amongst others. Creating reports often necessitates the joining of multiple entities. However, the entities sometimes this process can be both inefficient and prone to errors. Not really errors, but maybe not give you the data that you require. While there are some predefined joins available within entities, the complexity of your reporting needs may require you join additional tables that entities don't provide. This can be a complex task, especially when dealing with complicated relationships between entities. For instance, getting certain reports using only entities might not be feasible if you need to determine the number of requests logged against a specific asset, or by department, particularly when an individual is associated with multiple departments. Entities alone may not suffice. So in such scenarios, the SQL Schema Designer can be a valuable tool, enabling you to design and implement more complex joins and queries to meet your reporting needs. So to figure out what to join and how to create relationships, you can use the Database Schema Viewer. Each piece of data there is organized into tables. By using the Database Schema Viewer, you can easily see which tables are linked together. This helps you understand how different parts of our data relate to each other. So let's take a look at this in more detail. So the request entity might be something like this. You can see that it contains details of a request, the ID, creation date, status. In the SQL Schema Designer, you would see the same details, but they are identified using the schema column names, such as HPK reference, HFK user, etc. You will also note that the primary key can be found or identified by the Y against the column name, which is going to be very useful when identifying what columns you can join things on. Now, there is a naming convention used to name table columns, and they will help you as well. You'll notice that some columns will be prefixed with H_PK, which identifies the column as a primary key. The H just says it's a Hornbill table or Hornbill column. Foreign keys also have a prefix of H_FK in the column name. Identifying the primary and corresponding foreign keys is fundamental to being able to retrieve data from multiple tables for a report. Now, one thing just to add here that you may have noticed if you've been using reporting recently that suddenly you can't find some of the column names that you could find before, and some of you may notice that there seems to be some discrepancy between a display name and the table names in the SQL schema. Now, that's because we're going through a process of giving friendly names to all the entities and all their attributes. So if you do see that, if you can't see the actual column name, search for the display name. But also in the Database Schema Viewer, it will tell you both of those names. So now I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to do a quick demo of how to use the Schema Designer to configure a simple report. So just bear with me a second. Okay, so you should be able to see my instance. And I'm just going to go through Service Manager, the configuration side, and select reports. Okay. So we're going to change that. You can see here, we can see default entity, but here's where we specify schema designer, and that will dictate what we see next. So I'm going to go into data collection, and I can go and select a table. So here you can see an example of tables that have the SQL names. Whereas if I scroll down, you'll start seeing that some of the tables have some nice friendly names. Okay, so one of the nice things about this view is you can actually type in the actual table names, and it will bring them up, or will filter that list. So in this case, I want requests. Find it myself. Yep. So I'm used to the old table names, so forgive me if I'm a little slow myself. Okay, so I've selected the table, and I can now start looking at columns, and I just click on the select columns. So to do this, all I need to do is type in the column name. So in this case, I might want the request ID as my first column. I just simply select the column and then click select column, and it'll appear at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so I might want to put the customer name. Bring that over. Okay, you can also select multiple columns. So let's say, for instance, that I want to put in request owner, and let's type. I can select multiple ones using the control key and just add them together. Okay, I'm just going to add a couple of other random fields. You can see that they're there. Now, what usually happens is you do something like I've just done, added some fields. Actually, I didn't want all of them, so I might need to remove them. Removing is a similar process. Select the field you want to remove. You can select multiple ones with the control key and just select remove column. Okay, and then you've got your report. So just like we saw before when we looked at entities in a previous course, you can add filters, and it's a very similar process. So I'll click in and add a filter. And then I will set my table. So I'm going to do it on requests. And I'm going to request type. Okay. And then what I need to say, well, how am I going to match up my request type? So is it going to be equal to something or so on? But in this case, I'm going to look for is one of. And this way I can say I want it to be, I want to look at only requests that are incidents or service requests, etc., or both. So in this case, I want to put it against these values, so I add a value. So when you're doing this, okay, you can add the values in. Request. Okay, and then just apply the value. If you make mistakes, you can select the value and you can delete them and just put them in again. If you want to edit them, just double click. So you can go in and change them. Okay, so there's my report. It's put in. I'm using the schema, but I just need to check that it works. So there's a very useful section here called data preview. And what that will do is it will preview a maximum of 500 records. So it means that if your query is not quite right, or it's trying to pull back 10,000 records or 20,000 records, it will only pull back 500. So it's not going to kill the system. And it means you can check to make sure the data you're getting back is what you expect. And then basically, once you're happy, you could then save your report. And if you want to run that report, you click on the run button and then simply click OK and go to the report history. You should see the report here. It will ask you to download. Note that it's also given me another format, which we'll talk about later, but I've got the PDF, and that gives me the actual output of my report. And you can open that up, and then you should get to see what that looks like. So just a couple of things that could be useful when you're working through the report. Just remember the naming of the fields and the tables may be slightly different. We will tell you what they are in the exercises, but if you're used to the old way, it might catch you out. Don't worry, it's not you. They have changed. Okay, good. Back to the presentation, sharing. Okay, so that takes us into our first activity, where you'll be looking to create a simple report using the SQL Designer. Remember, if you have any issues here during the activity, please raise your hand by pressing on the hand icon, and Joel or Albina will be there to help you. And once you've completed the activity, please return back to the class by switching back to presenter mode. What I would suggest as well that you do at the beginning of this exercise, you will notice at the top of the exercise, there's some instructions to check to make sure that you can scroll up and down the instructions, and you can minimize and maximize the instruction view, and actually you can see your lab area correctly. If you have any issues with that and logging in, please get Joel or Albina to help you, because obviously we need to get this to working at now, because you're going to be using this all the way through the session. So jump into the labs and please read the instructions and as you follow it through, and hopefully it should be plain sailing. Okay, guys, I'm going to move on. So again, don't panic if you've got a last couple of steps to do. You'll be able to finish those off towards the end, but most of you look like you've got through that okay. And again, if you do have any problems with any of the labs or activities, do press that assistance button. So what can we take away from that previous activity? First thing you will notice that SQL was not required. So when using this interface, and that all the available tables and fields were provided for you, and were easy to select. The only thing you need to know is which table, which column. So building the criteria for the report was equally straightforward. Those of you that were in the first session, very similar. Even using the date functions was very straightforward, because again, you select it from a list. You should have noticed that after generating the report, not only was the PDF available, but there was also a CSV file or CSV version. That's just one of the options that defaults on a report. But what that enables you to do is take the output of the report and plug it into other tools like Excel. You may want to push it up to the cloud in Azure and use Power BI. Hopefully you can see how this report could be used to show team performance, concerning resolution times and efficiency. Also, we did have a question. I think Peter mentioned something about how could you, rather than having the first of the month, how could you put in a specific date and time? Now, for those of you that were in the first session, we did cover that. I think it was one of the stretch goals, where you can use the prompt and select a Hornbill prompt that will actually give you a calendar, and you can select a specific date from that. It is possible to also hard code it. Again, that's is documented in the documentation. Okay. So now we've worked with tables and we've started looking at single tables. As we know, in order to get additional information into a report, you may need to go and add tables, and that's where joins come in. So a join operation in SQL is used to combine rows from two or more tables based on related columns between them. So understanding joins is essential for effective data retrieval, as they allow you to extract meaningful information from multiple tables. Let's take a look at two example tables and understand how joins work with them. So here we have a request table, which is our first table, or the left table, and a user table, our second, or the right table. Okay, so the common column between these two tables should be relatively straightforward to see. It's the user ID, which is a foreign key in the request table and a primary key in the users table. Different types of joins include inner join, left join, right join, each serving a specific purpose in data combinations. So just to point out as well, some of you that are SQL proficient, there are other joins. If we don't, we only support those three main joins within Hornbill. A join is also known as an inner join. It returns rows where there is a match in both tables. So in the request table, if you've got a customer name or customer ID, and in the customer table that ID exists, then it will output data from both tables and it will match and it's joined. So in our example, the column is user ID. So you can see here, put the two tables together, it's found that 101 and 102 and 103 exist in both tables, so it will output three rows. 106 and 104 do not appear in both, so they'll be excluded. So you can see the output. So if we join the two tables, the result will only include requests where we have a corresponding user in the user table and within the request table. If there's no match, as I mentioned, they do not appear. So a left join returns all the rows from the left table and any matched rows from the right table. So if there's no match, the result is empty on the side of the right table. So again, if you've got, in the example we do all the requests, you'll get all the requests. But for each request, you should get a customer. If there was no customer, then it would be blank, and you'll see that. Okay, so joins retrieves all request IDs from the request table and usernames from the user table. If the request has no matching user, the username will be empty, blank. And we'll see that in the output. Okay, so you can see here, every request was output, but request 4, because there was no corresponding user in the user table, you can see that the name and department are blanked out. A right join is similar to a left join, but as you probably guessed, it's the opposite way around. Returns all rows from the right table and only the rows from the left that are match. If there's no match, the result is empty on the left-hand side of the table. So as you can see here, the join retrieves all usernames from the user table and the request IDs from the request table if the user has no matching requests, the request ID will be empty, as you can see from the output here. So when we right join our tables, the results set will include all users, even those without corresponding request. For users without a match, the request related fields will be empty. So let's move on to a demo, and we'll look at how we configure these joins using the SQL Schema Designer. This will help you understand how to use the tool to create a join without writing complex SQL. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so we're back into the screen here. So I'm going to use the same report I had before. So I'm going to go look at the data collection. We selected some requests here. So I want to add some information about the user or the customer. So I might want to put the customer's telephone number on and the customer's email address, which is not included within the request table. So in order to do that, I need to add a new table. So the initial left table is here. So I select the new table. And this one's going to be an interesting one because you'll see that I've got a table from Service Manager, and now I'm selecting the table that's outside of Service Manager. It's the Sys Accounts table. Now this table holds all the users, so it's quite a generic table, and that's one of the reasons why it's got the H_Sys accounts, because it's not a Service Manager table which has all nice, pretty names. So I'll select the table, I add it. Now, if this was an entity, I wouldn't have to do all of this because the joins are already predefined. But in this case, I have to specify those joins manually. So you'll note I can go in and I can select what should be the right table. And you can see I then need to specify whether I want to join left, right, or just a join. So in this case, I'm just going to go for a join. And then I can need to select the join. It's pretty much like doing a filter at this point. So I'm just basically going to specify how do these two tables, how can we link these two tables together? So firstly, I'll specify, in this case, the left table. And then we're going to look for customer. Okay. So here, you could go and say, oh, that's the customer name. I'll select that. But that's a display name. What you actually need is the ID of the customer. And this will be the primary key in the customer table or the user table. So I select customer ID. And then it's generally going to be equals. And then you want to say what it's going to be equal against. So I need to specify it's a table that I want to link it to. And then what that table is and what column in that table. So table, it's going to be Sys Accounts. Now look at here, and I need to find the primary key. And you can see that's down here, it's user ID. Now you'll note that it's not telling me that information here, and this is where the schema viewer becomes really, really valuable. And that's in the entity viewer tool, or the entity tool. Okay, so now I've got that. It's all configured. I'm just going to save it. Okay, and I can just test to make sure that that's working by using the preview. And now you see it's worked, but what I haven't got is the additional columns because I need to select those. Okay, it's exactly the same as we've done before, and you can see it's defaulted to these tables, but I can be more specific and say that I don't want to see all the fields. I just want to see maybe the account stuff. And that way I can look for email. Properly. That, and that was a telephone number. So telephone number. Now when I look at that preview, you'll see that I've got some details, and somewhere along the line I should have some telephone numbers and email addresses for the customers that add on here. And obviously you can see where there are blank ones. That's not because the join of that. It's going to be because there's nothing against that particular account. Okay. So the customer is a customer for that, but there is the telephone details and email for everybody. That's why. Okay. So that's pretty much it for a join. One of the other things I'll just mention here while we're here is that one of the things you'll notice when you run the preview here, you'll see that the column names are not always the best. So you can see that I've got some nice ones here, but these ones are kind of this long, horrible format. I just wanted to say email and telephone. So I can change that. I can go back to the table, sorry, columns, and I can click on the edit for a column. So if I go to the email, I click onto there, and then I can put whatever I want in here as the display name for that column. So I can have it as email if I choose to. I might want to have it as contact method or something. telephone. Okay, and that just enables me to configure how it's displayed in the report. That can be very useful, and it cuts down the size of the report as well significantly. Okay, and that's how you create joins and reports. So let's get back to the environment. So this brings us to another activity, and in this one you'll be looking at using different joins to create a report that lists assets linked to service requests. Don't forget, if you need any help, raise your hand, and once completed, make sure you return to the presentation mode. Don't be tricked to go through to the next activity. Also, do not worry if you're unable to finish the labs, as you can continue where you left off on the subsequent activities. We will also allow some time at the end to finish them off and complete them. Okay, so let's have a look at this lab, and let's create some successful joins. I think most of us are finished. Again, don't worry too much if you haven't quite got to the end of it. As you said, you can carry on when we go into the next activity. And if you do need any extra help, please use Joel and Albina to provide assistance. That's what they're here for today, and they'll be happy to help you. Okay. So what can we take away from that activity? You created a report that included an example of using both left and right joins to combine data from different tables. And the importance of providing filters to provide streamlined data, which enables you to focus on only the relevant data. Also ensuring that you do not attempt to output a large number of records. Remember, that always going to be an issue when you're working with a lot of data. Try not to output the entire request table because you will get performance issues. This report is a good example of the use of a reporting for asset management and identifying issues with devices. Some of you would have noticed that you're using three tables, and actually you've got requests on one side, and on the far right side you've got assets. And in between that, you have a table that kind of links the two together. And the reason for that is because you can have many assets against an individual request. It's not just a one-to-one relationship. So in those cases, you will always find that there is another table that will be used solely to provide links between different entities. Okay, so look out for that when you're working with reports in future. Okay, one thing that did come up before I move on is that you've noticed when I showed you in the demo that you can actually change the column names from the system defaulted ones. So, I think it was Craig that noted out that if you don't have a join, you don't have the option to edit. But what you can do is add another table, add another join table, go back and make the changes, and then remove the join table, and it keeps the settings. So a little bit of a workaround there. Okay, good. So when designing effective reports, it's crucial to understand your data, as I'm sure some of you have found that out, and being able to define the clear objectives. What do you want it to do? And where can I get that information from? And then using the visual tools available to create the joins and relationships without having to write any SQL code. And also test your reports using the preview just to make sure that you've got the correct data, you're outputting the right fields. And also that will do it in a nice performance. It'll cut the number of records. So even if you come back with 200,000 records, it's only going to come back with 500. So it won't kill your system while you're playing around, making sure that you've got everything right. Okay. So some reporting tips. Basically, to optimize your report queries, you'll want to link tables and filter records using criteria that's generally based on index fields. Now, index fields will be fields like the primary key, foreign key fields, or keys or fields that are searched a lot, and we will build an index against it. Basically, if it's got an index against it, it's going to be quicker. It's going to search for that information in memory rather than having to go to disk to pull information, which is really, really slow. So understanding that, what fields are indexed and which ones aren't, that is also given to you from the SQL Schema Explorer. And you'll see that, and basically you will see, if you click on the details of each entity, for instance, and the table information, you'll see at the bottom of each table, it gives you a list of all the index fields. The more you can stick to those fields, the better. Of course, sometimes you might not be able to do that. So therefore, you may have to do something that's not quite perform very well. But again, in that situation, what you want to make sure is that the tables that you're doing that against doesn't have a large number of bits of data. Okay, because if you're not using the index field, it's going to run slower, and that has an impact on your instance. So always use criteria to restrict the number of rows. So you shouldn't be doing a report that says list me all the request tables and then all the assets against each request, because that's going to be a massive output, and it's not really what you want, because what you're going to do with all that data. So restrict it as far down as possible to make that information that comes back, or the output comes back, that's going to be meaningful to you. Okay, so, and one of the other side of that is performance issues that caused by queries may get terminated by our cloud team. So therefore, you'll find that the request will be terminated because it's taking up too much processing time, and it's having a detrimental impact on your instance. So try to use date ranges where possible to produce manageable output. So weekly, in between these two dates, that kind of thing. There are some additional output types that you can also use to move data to other applications. I showed you earlier with the CSV output that comes up. And obviously that can be used for, if you can't quite get the output that you want in Hornbill, you can push it to something like Excel, or maybe up to Power BI, and then actually have even more complex reporting. And also that way as well, you can report on external data as well. Note, when you're scheduling a report, we talked about prompts. We haven't really done them in this session, but all those that you were on the first course, we looked at user identified prompts. Remember that if you have prompts on a report, it won't run if you schedule it, because there's nobody to actually put the prompt in. So like you saw in one of the previous exercises you did today, or activity you did today, you put in a date time. So I think it was the first of the month or start of month. You can do things like end of year, end of week, last week, that kind of thing. You need to separate your prompts to use a static value, and that's what those functions are there for. So while designing your reports, also be mindful of Hornbill's row limit and performance constraints, as we've touched on already. So if you exceed these limits, you will have not issues, but we will, or the cloud team will notify you, most likely, to say that you're doing that, and just to work out what you're doing, make sure there's not a problem or an issue. But they may terminate the process as well, which means you'll come back with incomplete data. There is a maximum row limit. I think it's 25,000. You'd have to I'll have to fact check for that, but it is in our documentation. Okay, so also just make sure that you don't, 50 joins, for instance, and really complicate your report, because the more complex you have it, the harder it is to work out what it's doing. And usually, if you've got a stupid amount of joins, it's probably because you're doing it not quite right, or you're trying to do something that's not possible. So again, it goes back to, what do I actually want to do, and am I looking at the right data? Okay. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is our new exciting challenge activity that was going to test your skills. It's there to test your skills. It's not like the others where we're telling you what to do. What we're going to do is give you some hints and tips and a use case. And basically, the idea is that you go away and you're trying to solve the problem for yourself. And that will give you a good understanding of where you are with generating reports within Hornbill. It is all possible, it's all doable. You just need to put your mind to it. So if you do get stuck on this, don't just go, yeah, let's ask for help. Have a look, read again, go through the system, see if you can find the tables at least in the columns, and then try and take it from there. If you're really, really stuck, obviously we're here to help you. But we also have provided the not quite step-by-step instructions, but a more detailed set of instructions that you can click through to. And if you're really, really struggling, we do have a finished report that you can have a look at to see what it looks like. But please attempt it first. So basically, you'll see here the user case is you're monitoring performance and identifying areas for improvement. I'm going to have a report that's going to be based on the request table, but also it's going to use service level management tables to get SLA information out of. So you're going to be using the request table and also a table called request_SLM targets. It's going to be focusing on joining those two tables. So you need to work out, how do I join these two tables? And then filtering the report to include the completed SLAs. So how do I know an SLA is completed? Again, that should be obvious when you're looking through the schema. So have a go at it. See how you get on. You've got 15 minutes for this. At the end of the activity, come back to the class. As I said, if you do need help, don't sit there scratching your head forever. Get Joel or Avila to help you. And also do remember that there are some extended help in the activity that should get you through it. Okay, so let's jump into the lab. So first of all, great job, everyone, for attempting that and going through that. No, it's always a bit of a challenge when you're not guided and you're just given hints and tips, but some of you seem to have got through it. But how many actually have managed to get through this without any of the hints and tips? Just give us a thumbs up. Brilliant. So yeah, good few of you managed to get through that. Then don't worry if you didn't. We're not expecting everybody to get through this. Obviously, depending on your experience on using reporting, it can be a little bit more difficult or tricky, especially if it's your first time. So don't worry so much about that. As I said, one of the things I haven't mentioned, we will be providing you with all the labs and so on, so you can do them after the session as well. They will be on the session handout. Yes, Steve, does help if you read the initial notes. Okay, brilliant. So, as I said, if you found the challenge difficult, don't worry. It was designed to push your limits and encourage critical thinking. So the goal was to help you apply your knowledge in a practical setting. And again, most of you got there. It's just a few small things that you probably missed or not quite understood. So you should identify the two tables required, or should have identified that required with the HITSM request table. And you should also be using the HITSM request SLM targets table, which holds the SLA information. And notice that the two key fields there would have been the request reference and the request ID. So the columns required should look something like we can see on the slide. So the key ones really would be request ID, target, net, duration, resolved by fields. If you've got more or less, then again, as long as you've got those key fields, and that's a good starting point. You can always add or remove once you've got the report working. And finally, your filter should have been checking to see if the target met flag was set, i.e., it's not null or empty or an empty value. So that's what you should have had. So if you haven't quite got that, I think somebody mentioned about only bringing back one record. It's probably going to be your filter that's wrong. But again, it's worthwhile having another look at your join, because it could be the join. So I'm going to move on from here now and start looking at another reporting tool that is part of Hornbill. We're not going to cover this in any detail. It's a bit of an overview, and this could be a session in its own right. I'm sure we will have a session for solely for advanced analytics in the future. As some of you are aware, it is an additional reporting tool. Some of you may have it, some of you may not. It all depends on your subscription. But what it does is it enables you to provide KPI dashboards. You can define measures which track trends over specific periods and use the captured data to produce various types of reporting via widgets. So measures enable you to store sample data that can be stored periodically over time. So maybe every week, every month, every quarter. For example, every month for a year or every quarter, as I just mentioned, you could have things like the number of calls that missed the SLA over a period of months. So you could look back and say, in March, we missed the SLA 50% of the time, whereas today we haven't missed any. That kind of trend. It's almost like a trend analysis type. So sample data that can be used to power the display of business management analysis tools, such as scorecards, spark lines, and actuals versus targets. So you've got different types of things, and you can see on the screen here, we're looking at some of that information. But its real power is when you add the data to a widget. And widgets are a component that you can use to populate dashboards. And it enables you to take that measured data and display it in a user-friendly format. So you've got different formats. So you might want just a chart. You might want a list of records. You can have a list of counters. And also you can use the spark lines and so on that we showed earlier. So there are various formats and different layouts, which we'll see shortly. It's also possible, though, to configure widgets to source live data from the database. So again, this is where you can use SQL to actually pull out meaningful data, similar to what you've done today, but for widgets. Okay, you can even link to other web resources and push them into iframes or divs, which enables you then to integrate with other systems to pull and have them side by side with Hornbill in a nice dashboard view. And of course, dashboards is the tool that really allows you to display all this information all together. This is the kind of thing you might put on a display over a service desk, for instance, or within a particular department, or it could be something that analysts view on their desktops. So it basically enables you to display the widgets in some kind of logical group. So you might have a dashboard that's about service desk performance. You may have one about changes and networking stuff and so on, or asset management board. So they can be quite useful. So you can have multiple boards. And the idea is that you can publish these to relevant staff and other stakeholders that have an interest in the data that's being put out in front of you. And obviously you can restrict it so it can only be viewed by the people you want it to be viewed. You can have many different dashboards, as I mentioned. And if you've got lots of dashboards, one of the things that you might want to do is you might want to configure it so it looks they look one different from the other. So you can change the coloring. You can put logos on there. So each team can have their own specifically designed dashboard. So bear that in mind with the dashboards. They can be very, very powerful. So as I said, you can have multiple dashboards and you won't be able to display them all over the place on multiple screens. So what you can do is you can provide a slideshow, which enables you to view multiple dashboards one after the other. So I'm just going to quickly give you a view of a dashboard, and I'm just going to share my screen again. Okay, so you can see here we have advanced analytics, and you can see that here are some measures, live measures, and you would create these measures and the measures would collect data over time. The widgets, and here are some examples of some widgets. And you can see here some counters, percentage ones here, so a graph and so on. So different formats for different things. I'm not going to go through every single one, but you get the idea. And if we have a look at a standard one of the dashboards, I'll have a look at the incident one. We can see here, this dashboard has got information about incident management and all the bits and pieces that might be there. So different types of charts. We've got some the measures here themselves. We've also got counters here as well that we can use. And as I said, a slideshow is a way of pulling all of that together so we can see that now we're viewing the main dashboard we've just seen, and it will eventually roll around to the next dashboard and show the service desk one. So that's pretty much what it is. Obviously, there's a lot more to it in the background. And as I said, this will warrant a course in itself. So I'm sure that's something that we'll be looking at producing sometime in the future. So keep a lookout for that. Okay. So what's the key takeaways from today? Apart from some of the exercises are difficult, the most important thing is that you should have found it not technical at all. The only real technicality is how much you know about Hornbill, not how much you know about SQL and joins and so on. So hopefully you found that a lot easier than you have been before. So I've taken you through several topics. So let's look at some of the key takeaways again. As I said, using SQL schema involves some additional steps to generate a report as opposed to entities. However, it does give you more control and flexibility, and you can produce more streamlined reporting. So you've seen how the schema designer visual interface works and how it simplifies the process, because as you can see, as I keep mentioning, you didn't type one line of SQL. You need to understand which tables have the required attributes to generate your report. And that's really that last exercise kind of showed that. How do I get this information? Where do I get it from? How do I know that this links to this field? And the more you know about the database or the underlying entities in the system, the more easier that becomes. So most of these details can be found using the tools provided. We talked about the Entity Explorer before, and also you've got the Hornbill documentation. So that currently, as you all know, is going through a revamp. So you should see more and more of that information coming into that documentation. So it should be easier going forward. Being knowledgeable in the use of joins and understanding how and when to use each type of join will be fundamental in being able to produce these powerful reports. And also, don't be scared of them, because you're not going to break anything. And the most that's going to happen is that you're going to write a report that performs badly and it will just get killed. But in most cases, the reports will output. Use the data preview to make sure that you've got the right data, and it should be plain sailing. It should make it a lot easier for you. Okay. So that's the end of really today's session, apart from the most important thing for today, the feedback. It's really essential to us because this helps us to improve the sessions in the future and make it more advantageous for you. Makes it easier for me and the guys that are doing the support. So we want to make these better, and we are doing this for you. And without your input, we can't do this and we can't make it better. So the link on the form should be in the. Hopefully, one of the guys have pushed that into the chat. So please click onto that. Spend a few minutes to complete it, and be as honest as possible. Okay, don't. We're not proud. If it's something that you don't feel that was right, we'll change it and we'll make it better. Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes to do that before we close out.